I have written a document here that I could follow so that I don't lose myself. Okay, so I'm going to begin with this. In Israel, the Sabbath rest for the land was the 7th year. Every 7 years the land was to rest for a year. Leviticus 25:4. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath rest unto the land. There's the command to let the land rest. Now, over 490 years, the Israelites skipped 70 Sabbaths for the land. Okay? That is why the Israelites were taken into captivity in Babylon for 70 years, so that the land would accomplish the rest God required. Right? At the end of those 70 years of captivity, the Lord told Daniel 70 weeks were determined upon the Israelites, or upon his people, is what he actually said. Okay? Chapter 9. Okay, it says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Right, so 70 weeks determined upon the holy people. Okay, this meant that God would deal with the Israelites for another 70 weeks of years, or 490 years, before the Lord would come to this earth and be anointed king. 70 weeks of years equals 490 years, right? And we saw that, in Daniel chapter 3, 1 7 times is 1 week, so this isn't unusual that the Lord has made these things called weeks of years, right? Okay, this all makes sense since Jesus said we have to forgive 70 times 7 when Peter asked him how many times to forgive. And let's look at that in Matthew 24, or Matthew 18 actually. Okay, Peter came to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Right? Times are years, and 70 times 7 is 490, so 490 years. So now this makes sense, doesn't it? That he would require 490 more years of them? Or he would actually forgive them for 490 more years. Okay, also remember this is also the same length of time it took for the Israelites to miss 70 Sabbath rests, 490 years. Right? So it took them 490 years to miss those Sabbath rests, and then 70 years in captivity, and now another 490 years in which I guess the Lord will forgive them. So the Israelites were in Babylonian captivity for 7 years, and at the end of that time, God tells Daniel another 70 weeks of years, or 490 years, are required before the Messiah is anointed. Right? Now, it took 7 weeks, which is 49 years, for Jerusalem to be rebuilt for the Messiah. That's in Daniel 9. Just one verse later, after verse 24, it says, Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. So there's 7 weeks of years, which is 49 years. Right? It took 7 weeks, which is 49 years, to rebuild Jerusalem for the Messiah. Then it took another 62 weeks, which is 434 years, for the wall and the street to be rebuilt. And once again, back in verse 25, and 62 weeks the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. So we got 7 weeks here, and an additional 62 weeks, for a total of 69 weeks, or a total of 483 years. Okay, so that is 69 weeks of years accomplished, or 483 years. 7 weeks and 62 weeks equals 69 weeks, or 483 years. Notice that at the end of the 69th week, right, the 7 plus 62, Jesus was cut off and the temple was destroyed. And let's notice that. That's the next verse again. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. There Jesus is crucified, right? And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Right? So at the end of the 69th week, Jesus was cut off and the temple was destroyed. Okay, there was 1 week left to be accomplished before Jesus is anointed. After the end of the 69th week, the Jews were cut off, and the times of the Gentiles began. Right, so, right here. Right, the Jews are cut off, and the times of the Gentiles begin. Right, the sanctuary is destroyed in 70 AD, and the Jews are scattered, right, throughout the whole earth. Right, and we know that between verse 26 and 27 is the times of the Gentiles, and that the Antichrist confirms the covenant for 1 week, that last week of 7 years after the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Right, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. The Jews were scattered throughout the earth. So far it has been almost 2,000 years since the end of the 69th week, or the beginning of the times of the Gentiles. The 70th week of Daniel is yet to be fulfilled. It is of course called the tribulation. There is a large gap of time between verses 26 and 27 in Daniel chapter 9, almost 2,000 years so far. Those are of course the times of the Gentiles as the Bible calls them. God did not tell Daniel anything about the gap between verses 26 and 27 in Daniel chapter 9. Okay, and I'm going to move on to, I'm going to finish this video because I can't finish it all in one, so I'm going to go to the Gospels where the same gap is there, and in Luke we're actually going to clearly see that immediately after the tribulation of those days means immediately after the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. And we're going to clearly see the division in all three Gospels between the times of the Gentiles and the times determined upon the Jewish people, and it's going to be the same as Daniel chapter 9, where there's the large gap between 26 and 27, those verses, and we're going to see the same thing in those ones. So watch my next video and you'll understand the Gospels a lot better.